Salve omnes, and welcome to How to Answer a Literature Analysis Question. This one focusing on what is a literature analysis question and what sort of things do you need to put down for it. It will not actually be using the text that we analysed and translated in the first two videos, so more of a sort of general what do we need. So the first thing is, how do you identify one? A couple of examples here. These are taken from the sample papers that OCR puts out, so they are meant to mirror a real exam, but obviously no one has actually been asked questions on these particular bits. So it's a relatively short question, except with only 4 marks, but actually you've been given quite a lot of space here. How does Tacitus, by his style of writing, blah blah blah, make 2 points each referring to the Latin? That referring to the Latin we are going to come back to. So this is a literature analysis question. Here's a longer one. You will get an 8-marker analysis question on each of the literature papers. Thankfully, for the 8-marker, you tend to get given a couple of hints of these are the kinds of things you should probably be thinking of. You don't have to talk about them, but it's suggested, and the passage and the question will be given to you in such a way that this is probably what you want to be focusing on. Again, there is this refer to the Latin business. Notice for an 8-marker, here you've got sort of 4.5 lines, so there's a reasonable amount to talk about. These, however, are not literature analysis questions. I mean, what does Tacitus say to convey Agrippina's ingenuity here? Kind of sounds a little bit like how does he show something? But you've only got 2 marks, there's only a small amount of space. They've not said refer to the Latin. It's not an analysis question, as is shown in the mark scheme. The mark scheme is just simple comprehension. You don't need to make 2 short points. If it doesn't say refer to Latin, it's not an analysis question. Also not an analysis question, because it doesn't say refer to the Latin. This is one of the summative or panoptic, a Greek word meaning all-seeing, essays. You'll get one at the end of each literature paper. They're not analysis questions. You do not need to quote the Latin and analyse the use of literature techniques. They are a slightly different thing. Okay, so you found a literature analysis question like this one. What do you need? Well, like in other essay subjects, first of all you need a point. What are you saying? How does Tacitus show Narcissus' hostility? Evidence. Where is your, and I'm going to emphasise this word, Latin? The most frustrating thing when I am marking is to find someone who has given me a quote in English and not given me the Latin, because it's completely irrelevant. I don't care. You're doing a Latin exam, give the Latin. Oh, it's a difficult concept. Okay, so you've made a point, you've got your quote. Why does that make sense? Why does your evidence back up your point? So this is where you're using your literary technique if you can, if you've got one. If you want to talk about repetition or tricolon, whatever, this is where you're putting your analysis. Why does this evidence make your point? If your point's a little bit tenuous, this is also kind of where you can, at the end of this, you can sort of put a bit of a link or refer back to the question and try and kind of make sure it makes sense. In other words, this looks like quite a few other subjects, your pair or peel or P essay paragraphs. Please make sure, by the way, that they are paragraphs. Much easier for the examiners to mark if they are distinct paragraphs. So here's the mark scheme for this particular section. Notice the importance of the evidence and the analysis. You must give a Latin quote. This is this accurate, relevant, and suitably explained reference to the Latin. It means give a quote and translate it. If you translate it accurately, it is an accurate quote. Well done, you get a mark. That's all there is to say about it. If you don't, you're probably not going to. For your analysis, you need to explain it. It's not enough to say that decus pudorem corpus, her honour, her modesty, her body, is a thing. It's like, okay, cool, why do we care? Ah, well, we could be in our point saying that Agrippina is willing to sell everything to gain, and so here the tricolon stresses how great her lust for power is. So yeah, make a point, give your evidence, analyse that point. You can just talk about content, so relevant aspect of content or aspect of literary style. You can just talk about content, but you can't only talk about content. It is easier generally to use the literary style if you can do so. This is for the 8 marker in particular, the range of well-selected content and features of literary style. Try to use literary technique if you can possibly get away with it. This is an examiner's report based on the actual 2018 summer prose literature paper, so not a paper anyone's going to get examined on anytime soon, because the texts change every 2 years, but it kind of shows what the thought process of the chief examiner is. Quite often you can see how irritated they are with candidates. Exhibit A. The most common error was for candidates to write a narrative of what happened. Don't just write a narrative. So this is an 8-mark question. They expect to see analysis. Every point the candidate makes should have a corresponding Latin quotation. Candidates should know the meaning of the Latin. So those two things basically means give a quote and translate it. By doing so, you show you know what it means. Great. Comment on how the Latin makes the passage dramatic and moving, which was the question in the first place for this one. So you need to actually explain it. How does your quote answer the question? Notice that here, it's a wide range of points. Candidates should also, rather than writing down the first few points they come across in the passage, pick the best ones. Don't panic in an exam. You see an 8-mark question and you just desperately write down the first 4 things that you come into mind and you leave half the passage unanalyzed. It's really poor. Take a little bit of time to plan. Think ahead. Think, oh, I'm going to talk about that, I'm going to talk about that, I'm going to talk about that. Oh, that's a nice point. Don't just panic and jump ahead. You can see the same kind of thing for a 4-mark question. It is a style question. References to just the content will not get credit for the analytical part. It is always best to do analysis. Where possible, interestingly by the way, we're going to come back to this one another time, candidates should look to analyse a short phrase of Latin rather than just one word. It's quite common for a candidate who doesn't really know the Latin to just give one word that they know the meaning of and desperately try to argue that that one word's really important and try and make it work. It's fairly obvious when a candidate's doing this and they don't really know what's going on, and the examiners don't like it. They expect you to know what the passage means. Many candidates did not really engage with the Latin and commented on the content rather than the style. Again, so these 4-mark questions, they want you to be talking about style. So everything that we did in the previous video, that's all there. Repetition, sound word, choice of word, all this kind of stuff, it's all in there. Okay, well, fine. So you've analysed the question. How many points are you going to make? 4 markers are pretty simple. Make 2. It says make 2, make 2. You could, maybe, if you had time, which you won't, go back and add another one, but ideally just make 2 solid points in the first instance. It's not that long Latin, so just make 2. The A markers are slightly harder. The exam in the previous specification, which was basically the same in many respects, used to say make 4 or 5 points. 4 points should be enough, 4 solid points should be enough. But hey, if you have time, make another one. You probably will not have a lot of spare time unless you write incredibly quickly. The general advice to get the best marks on this paper is know what the Latin says. Just like actually know it. Off by heart if you can. Because those comprehension questions that we skimmed over earlier, if you know what the Latin says, they're 3 marks. You can just write down the answer instantaneously. You don't have to be trying to work it out. OCR also put out some candidate exemplar answers. So no one actually ever wrote these, but it's like the kind of suggestion of what you could be writing. So this is a 4-mark question, and that's all they've written. It's not a lot. This first one, because they have not shown that no grasp of the meaning conveyed, they've basically just quoted a load of Latin, and there is an asyndeton there. They've not got any ands in there. It's absolutely correct. They could have talked about as well the tricolon and sort of quite anaphoric, but they haven't, so they're not going to get the 2 marks because they've not shown they didn't know what it means. In other words, translate the damn thing. Same here. They've given the Latin, they've translated it, and then they've given the briefest bit of analysis possible, a question word followed by an early verb. And that's apparently worth 2 marks. Frankly, a little bit generous, but hey, whatever. This is a 4-mark question, which actually I think is possibly slightly harsh. So here they've picked out several different things, but they've not really analysed any of them. And this is that kind of problem: is this candidate, do they actually know what's going on, or are they just picking out random words that they know the meaning of and hoping it kind of makes sense? So the imperative eke, it's not quite. The word dum, showing the chaos of the moment. What does that mean? The use of the present participle, whistling, to make this. It doesn't quite explain the question. Virgil uses the harsh alliteration. The dissonant sounds mirror the harshness of the actions and build momentum. I think this is actually not a bad point, but notice they've not translated it. Where is the exact point that they're making here? If the candidate had said Virgil emphasizes the rapid movement of the action or something like this in the phrase blah blah blah, and they translated it, they might well have gotten the mark here, but they didn't. So they didn't. And finally, an 8 marker. This one, a full 8 marks for this 8 marker, which okay. So they've given 6 points here, which is not really what I'd recommend doing, particularly because points 1 and 2 here are quite weak. He launched warships. This launching of the warships suggests his uncle is going to war against the volcano. That's, first 2 words will do. It doesn't quite answer the question. It's a little bit not really be explained. I think you could probably argue it. Maybe you're talking about like the military language here, but they've not really explained it. This second one here, again, this chiasmus is used to highlight is used to emphasize the verbs. Okay, it is. You could possibly add a little bit more to it, but then sort of 3 and 4 aren't bad, and 5 and 6 are pretty solid. Particularly 6, they've really emphasized how it works. So overall, they've given a lot of points, they've translated them all, they are using literary analysis, they've tautology, chiasmus, comparatives, tricolon, anaphora, historic present, there's enough there. And so overall, because it's marked on a grid rather than a sort of bullet point yes-no, it comes to a reasonably comprehensive answer to the question. Okay, so that's what you need for one. Next step is, what do you actually need to write for one? How do you break down the question? So here is, again, from the same sort of place, all the sample literature questions. Here are a load of questions. First thing, refer to the Latin. Referring to the Latin, referring to the Latin, refer to the Latin, must refer to the Latin, you should refer to the Latin. Each refer to the Latin means give a quote, translate the damn thing. It's an analysis question, do so. The questions will vary a little bit. Some of them are a bit sort of, how does he show that Niobe is fortunate? How does he emphasize the positive aspects of? Those are quite obvious. Some of them are a bit vague. What makes this such a graphic and vivid description? Okay, so those are the 2 types. Well, the first one's pretty easy. How does he show that Niobe is fortunate? Answer the question. Simple. This, how does he make it exciting? How does Ovid make this passage dramatic? That, you could argue that that's just the examiner saying, write whatever you feel like, I'll mark it. Realistically, they want you to analyse the theme still. Pick for yourself. And you can kind of see in this one here, how does he make the passage dramatic? Is then actually broken down to how the death of the daughter is described, and what's her reactions. You could easily make it, how does he make the deaths of Niobe's daughters and her reaction dramatic, or how does he make them sympathetic? That kind of thing. Basically, this is why we analyse the theme of the passage in part 2. When you're reading your Latin set text, don't read it like it's a mathematical equation and you need to know how A equals B. You do need to know what the Latin says, but you also need to think about what the Latin is saying. What is the author talking about? What is their point that they are making? Thank you very much. Hope that helps.